Okay. My name is Stacey Joy, and I am in Los Angeles, California. Today is January 5th, 2021. I am interviewing Seana Wright from Los Angeles, California for the oral history project titled COVID-19 Teacher Poets Writing to Bridge the Distance, which will be archived by the Oklahoma State University Oral History Research Program.
Hey,
Hello, my friend. Will you
hi,
introduce yourself, please?
hi, Stacey. How are you?
Well, thank you.
My name is Seana Wright. I am a teacher, mother, wife, friend, daughter of teachers, and yeah, I'm a teacher educator.
Tell us about how you became an educator.
Well, I became an educator I was dragged into it. Both of my parents were teachers with my school district, Los Angeles Unified School District. And I refused to be a teacher because I grew up helping out with bulletin boards, going to after school programs, going to schools, helping with sentence strips and things. So it didn't seem glamorous and I didn't want to do it. But um, after college and working in um, a couple of different industries, I wasn't making enough money. And my dad kind of, and both my parents had encouraged me to take education classes in college just in case. And of course, I just kept refusing. And one day my dad kept coming at me, come on, you should be a teacher. You should be a teacher. And I kept saying no. And after about 3 years after being out of college, I share this story at his memorial service. He knew to come at me a different way. And he said, how much money are you making? What's your dream car? What's your dream vacation? And I told him, and he said, can you afford that on the money you're making right now? And I said, and I really thought about it. And I thought, no, I can't. And he said, if you were a teacher, you could. And, we sat down and we looked at numbers and, they were round figures. And I said, oh, and he said, if you become a teacher, you could have the car you want, you know, a little German car. He said, you could have that in 6 to 8 months. He said, whereas if you stay with your company, you can't. And, I thought about it over a few days and I thought about a vacation I wanted to take. And that kind of stirred me, in the right direction. And I took the CBEST and I was teaching within 6 months. I started out as a substitute
Wow.
and I worked at a few places. And then I was um, blessed to get into a long-term sub situation at my mom's school. So I had a built-in mentor and I stayed at her school for 15 years. And what was wonderful is all of her mentors. My mom was a mentor teacher, and a lot of her friends who were mentors mentored me. So it just, it took about 3 years for it to feel right, or and to feel like I sort of knew what I was doing. But after that, I realized this is what I was meant to do.
Wow. I love that story. So
Thank you.
what is your role in education now? Talk a little bit about your school context.
Well, I've been teaching for 30 years. In fact, every January I mark a year. So I will be beginning my 31st year. I've always taught upper grade. Well, mostly I've taught upper grade. I taught kindergarten and second grade. I see the importance of it, but it just doesn't, it's not what I love. I prefer fourth and fifth primarily. I was able to become a national board certified teacher about 13 years ago. It was a challenge, and I wanted to challenge myself. And it was one of the things. One of the my mom was a mentor teacher, and she kept encouraging me. And she said, "Why don't you go for the national board certification?" And I'm glad I did. One of the things that I really want to do, and that I pride myself on doing every year, is bringing culture and culturally relevant content into the classroom, hands-on learning as much as I can. Obviously, before COVID, home language appreciation and working with the students with culturally relevant stories and really, helping out with constructive conversations
Mm.
and teaching the students how to code switch
Yeah.
and the importance of that. So that is definitely something that is important, and I've noticed in the last 10 years that's important in the classroom.
Okay. So we're also here to document the impact that COVID-19 has had on educators and education. So
Yes.
going back to the spring of 2020, how did you learn that teachers in your state would be teaching remotely or that the school buildings would be closing?
Well, my oldest daughter lives in New York, and she kept talking to us about it. And she mentioned to me that the schools in New York were closing and that she was considering coming home. And I thought, I hope our schools close, but I didn't think they would because I didn't hear anything on the news. And our teachers union wasn't saying any, they were hesitant. They weren't saying a lot at the beginning. And then finally, that last week, the teachers union said something on Wednesday of the last week that we worked. And they said, wait and see Thursday. And, then I really started paying attention to the news and I thought, we shouldn't be here. We should be at home. So I think that Thursday, I thought should I take off anyway, just kind of call in sick a couple of days just because. And I had a new student who'd been in my classroom approximately a month, and she was going around teasing students. And every time a student would cough or sneeze, she would turn around and say, "You have COVID, get away from her." And I was very strict with her. And I would say, you can't say that to people. That's discrimination. I
Right.
could cough myself. I mean, everyone has allergies. So, I was very cognizant of her behavior. But at the same time, I understood the fear that a lot of people were feeling. So I just kept watching the news, and I noticed, the teachers on my grade level, we were talking about it. And then I believe the Thursday night before our last day, the either I don't know if it was the superintendent or the president of the teachers union said they were going to be making an announcement the next morning at 10 a.m. And then I got a text from a teacher who was at my school and said, we're going to close today. So I found out 10:15 that we were closing that day and my school's out at 2:15.
Mhm.
So I was shocked. I was kind of waiting. I was expected to hear from the principal, and eventually she sent an email to us about an hour later.
Mhm.
So I felt, I mean, in the moment, I felt just a little glad, only because I was tired and
Right.
spring break was coming and it was middle of March. And
Mhm. Mhm.
I was getting ready for testing and the students were, some of them were ready, some of them were not. I hadn't taught, of course, everything. So I felt ambivalent about it. I wanted a vacation, and I also wasn't worried about money because I kind of felt like um, I'm okay with going home for a couple of weeks while they figure this out, this COVID thing. It's
Mhm.
going to be over in 3 weeks and I'll be back at school. So I was actually okay with it.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the students packed I told them to take home just a few things because I knew 100% for sure we would be
Be
back.
back.
So I didn't send home everything. I wish I had, but I had them pack up some things. And, the door was closed and they were all in line. And I thought to myself, um, wow, I'm not going to see them for a while. And then I also thought, what if this isn't over? Should I make a speech? Should I say something profound? And something. And I couldn't think of what to say. And I just remember, the loudspeaker came on because the principal said the nice speech, which was great. So I just said, mainly she assured them that they would be okay, they were being safe. Um, but it's funny, a TA came right into my room at that moment with a box of gloves and a big bottle of disinfectant and said, please clean your room before the students leave. Before you leave, after the students go home, because when they come back in 2 weeks, these tables should be ready. So it kind of broke my emotional feeling of, bye
Mhm.
students, I love you. I may not see you again, but I probably will. That was broken by that bottle of disinfectant, the gloves, and me by myself cleaning all of the tables alone, which I thought would take hours. Of course it didn't, but so I said goodbye to them. They left. Yeah, and I had mixed feelings about it, but I was glad in the moment because I needed a break.
Yeah, yeah. And that was around the same time as National Poetry Month beginning. So you,
Yes,
along
yes,
with other educators, participated in the writing poetry for each day of the month of April.
yes.
And if you don't mind, can you talk a little bit about writing poetry during the pandemic? And then if you have a poem you'd like to share that relates to that time?
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Um, so during that time, I wrote a poem. Uh, um, I didn't go back to school after spring break, and I sat there at home wondering what the students were doing. And once we started I'm calling it pseudo distance learning because it wasn't
Mm-mm.
good distance learning, but it was what the school district said, do something. So
Mhm.
I wrote something, and my poem, I didn't give it a title,
Okay.
but it goes like this: Fifth, students, distance learning? Are you learning? Have technology? Mama cell or daddy's? What is going on at home? Who is there encouraging you? Is there quiet and a place to write? Will you be ready for middle school soon?
Mm.
And that's my poem. And
Wow.
I was concerned. I was very concerned
Yeah.
because I was not hearing from students at all.
Mhm. So how
And
does it feel now that you're on the other side of all that and you hear your words for while you were on the beginning of it?
oh, it feels terrible because I lost so many students. And from what I hear, through teacher blogs and from different things I'm reading, there are students who are just lost, who aren't participating, who are not showing up to class.
Mhm.
So I definitely I can relate to, of course, to what I read, and I see
Right.
it in my classroom now, and it hurts. It hurts.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
hurts. And and again, as a fifth grade teacher, my biggest concern is, are the students going to be ready for middle school?
Right.
And then that's the biggest concern for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know also that COVID-19 impacted states and schools in different ways. So speak in particular just to California and how you feel like our state responded. And then did you feel like there were any particular policies that impacted you as an educator?
One of the first things that I kept hearing about, especially in California, but primarily in the city of Los Angeles, was a need for food. And
Mhm.
that surprised me, but I wasn't shocked. And because businesses closed so abruptly, I know that a lot of parents were not able to, you know, buy groceries. And because of the long lines at the stores, because people were buying things and hoarding things, it was a challenge, I know, for the parents to be able to have something to feed their students. And a few students would confide in me that they they were only eating dinner and weren't eating a lot of food. And some of them were, some were feeling weak. Some were going to grandparents' houses for meals and weren't able to come to our Zoom meetings in the spring because mom had to work or dad had to work and they had to stay with grandparents. And there were students on camera wearing masks because someone in their home, it was about 3 students
Mm.
who would meet with me, occasionally with a mask on because they said someone had COVID in the house, but they wanted to come to class and they wanted to see their friends. And it surprised me to sort of realize that it's not, for me, it's the academics, but
Yeah.
for them, it's the socialization and the talking and sharing and laughing and telling jokes. And, so it impressed upon me that there was a need for connection. There was a great need for food for
Mhm.
parents. And the school district was giving away meals every day at different location sites. And I wanted to go volunteer a little bit, but once they, urged us to teach every day or reach out to students, primarily it was, I believe I was told 2 days a week, then I was told 4 days a week, then I was told try to reach out 5 days a week and try to sort of stick to reasonable hours and the hours that mainly that you were using for school.
Mhm.
I wasn't available to go and help pass out food in the mornings because I tried to Zoom every morning.
Mhm.
Many students didn't come, at first. Some students said, "Could we Zoom at 6 and 7 o'clock?" Some students couldn't Zoom until after 1 o'clock. But because of the school district mandates, sort of, I was trying to stick to, the
Mhm.
morning hours.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it was a challenge, and then technology definitely was an issue. I was happy that my school district and within the state, I will say our governor gave money to our school district and to other school districts, and the students were able to get technology. So that was a major issue, getting
Mhm.
the right Chromebooks or iPads for students. And I went to school and helped pass out Chromebooks and iPads to students. And I did that one day. All the teachers, we had masks and gloves, but
Mhm.
I primarily did it because I missed my students so much and I wanted to see them. And I was really, the highlight of doing all that was I saw a boy that in class, didn't always pay attention, didn't always get his work done,
Mhm.
but was a nice young man. And he had never logged on during the distance learning.
Mm.
He never logged on, he never used anything. And then when we had one of those days, I believe it was in April or end of April, early May, he
Mhm.
showed up at school the one day I was there to pick up a Chromebook. And it was just great to see him. And he looked as if he'd grown 2 or 3 inches. Of course, he hadn't, but it was just great to see him. His hair was longer, but it just made me happy to see him and be able to chat with him for 3 or 4 minutes. And he had been going through some things,
Mhm.
but usernames and passwords were a major issue.
Mhm.
And so that stopped a lot of students, and that bothered me. But so part of it, some of it, a little bit of it was it is what it is, and then some of it was let me help you. Let me reach out to
Right.
parents and try to help.
So was this also a time when you found yourself able to write something that was reflective of that experience you were having?
Yes. I mean, yes, I was able to do some writing. Let me find something that I thought about during then, just kind of, one of the things that as I was going through this, I thought about my parents as teachers and I thought, how would they have handled this?
Mm.
And so, as teachers I mean, they taught in the late 60s,
Mhm.
70s, and 80s. So I thought, how would they have handled this? What would they have done? And so I wrote a poem, um, just kind of talking about my childhood a little bit, but also thinking of them.
Okay.
And it is called Brain Power. Okay, so I'm going to share that. All right. Daddy was analytical. Mommy was emotional. He knew people and she saw intention. They
Mm.
both could see BS coming a mile away. They taught me to think first and use your mouth second. Didn't always do that, especially when I was younger. But time, being a teacher, and becoming a mother has taught me to shut up sometimes. Daddy said to surround yourself with like minded people, those who are as smart or smarter than you. Mommy sat with those who laughed, cried, analyzed, danced, and cussed. I enjoyed being the only child during my younger years, surrounded by scholars, educated fools, and souls in search of love and meaning. I watch people now sometimes and wonder why they're angry, ugly, thrilled, or peaceful. What narrative is running through their head and heart?
Mm.
What narrative is running through mine? I just want to make sure I stay centered and always at peace.
Wow.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you. That one, I loved that one.
Yeah, I was feeling like I noticed that there was a shift in your energy, like it seemed to be so calm and centered, like bringing mom and dad into the poem gave you like almost a
Yeah.
sense of peace. What do you feel like you feel with that?
You know, I feel great about it. I mean, I miss them both, but I did, I wondered how would they feel if they were in this. And I know my mom, because she was emotional, would say, "You have to help those babies," and she
Mhm.
would encourage me to go to students' homes. And I wish,
Welcome.
it made me want to reach out to them more. I mean, I had fantasies about meeting with the students at a public park and having them bring their, you know, Chromebooks with them, or and me in the park with the mask and the shield and a long list of the usernames and
Oh.
passwords, and kind of saying, look, you know your username, we used it in class, remember this and this. And you know I just
Wow.
had, yeah, but I mean, I didn't because I couldn't, and
Right.
it wasn't safe, but I wanted to,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I want, you want, as a teacher, you want them to be able to connect.
Mhm. Mhm. It's a struggle.
It's a struggle, yes.
So we're going to move now into looking at how some states continued with their distance learning throughout the school year up to the end of the school year. So how did your school year end?
Okay, so my school year ended with my school district offered an online class over 6 weeks, teaching, giving background and help in distance learning,
Mhm.
and offering a lot of information and help and classes. So I signed up for it because I wanted to be, distance learning certified, and it really helped. It was once a week, but it was once a week on, I believe, on Thursdays in the afternoon. But what was nice is you could also participate in the Monday class if you needed, extra help. So I
Mhm.
signed up for that. So that helped. And
Good.
that helped me to know of different platforms and websites and different ways to reach students.
Okay. So then I would assume that, I mean, obviously with that kind of training, you're gaining lots of new practices. So how did this experience change your teaching practices?
Well, it helped me to first just to understand how Zoom works and what it all the different things that Zoom could do. Because I felt in April when I started, I sort of felt like the blind leading the blind.
Mhm.
So it gave me hands-on experience, and I Zoomed with other teachers. I watched what other teachers were doing, and it helped me to realize, oh, you could make Zoom fun, you could make it exciting and engaging, and it introduced me to games and projects. So that, trying to see if I wrote one down, but it helped me to sort of make my teaching a little more engaging.
Mhm.
And I discovered Kahoot, and
Okay.
my students, and it once I played a Kahoot game at the end of the year, the last week of school, I had, the students enjoyed it. And then it seemed like I had a much bigger audience. And
Mhm.
I was glad to see them. But when 5 students showed up that I hadn't seen before,
Mhm.
I thought, okay, now if you're able to join a Zoom to play a game in June, you could have joined in April and May.
Right.
Um,
Right.
And then at the end of the year, I did feel I will say, I was a little disappointed with my school district because their grading policy
Mm.
wasn't what I thought it should be. I understood it in my brain, but I just didn't appreciate that we couldn't give a student what they deserved.
Mhm.
But I had to, as you know, as a teacher, you have to follow school district mandates
Yeah.
and policies.
So is there anything that you would go back and change if you could, as far as the way that this panned out last year?
I think that, I mean, yes, I would, if I knew that this was coming and the way it was coming, a good week before we left, I would have focused a lot more on making sure the students knew how to log in terms of their username and password and how to find it.
Mhm.
And I never give out my cell phone number,
Mhm.
but I might have bought a little flip phone,
Right.
cheapest little phone, so that I could give a phone, so that I could give that phone number to my students and use
Yeah.
it just for work, where they could call me directly and say, I'm trying to log on.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a student on the last day of school when we had our online culmination. There was a student who had done great work and for whatever reason could not get logged on. And this boy, I had selected this young man to read his culmination speech.
Oh,
Luckily, he had emailed it to me and I was able to play it. But he wasn't, for some reason, he wasn't able to log into the Zoom to
oh,
watch it himself. And but I played the video, and when the students clapped and congratulated him and I called out awards, unfortunately, he wasn't there. So moments like that are heartbreaking. So I wish I'd spent a little more time on technology just to
mhm.
make showing students how to access curriculum
Mhm.
and how to share my screen and
Mhm.
how to troubleshoot when things don't go the way they want.
Right.
So I feel like that's probably my biggest regret.
Yes, I completely agree with those feelings.
Yes.
So was there a poem for the end of spring that you feel like connects with kind of that closure of school and
Yes. Let me read that one. Now, this one is very emotional for me, but I feel like I was speaking for myself and
Mhm.
for many teachers.
Okay.
So this one is called Parent Conversation Code Switching. So for for people who don't know, just in case, code switching is when you're saying something and you're using home language
Mhm.
and then you're using school language or work language. So and that's something that we as teachers, that's something we teach. But
Mhm.
there's just a conversation that I have in my head with parents, and then what I actually say and what I want to say.
Okay.
All right. So again, it's called Parent Conversation Code Switching. Mrs. Jones, let's talk about your son, Johnny. Listen here, lady. I'm about to give you the skinny about your son. He's special. I'm concerned about his lack of attention during class. Mother, you told me you took drugs years ago. Is he a drug baby? At times, he has difficulty listening long enough while I explain multiple step math problems. He listens 5 seconds, then looks around for classmates to laugh with. Your son, he talks too much to classmates, especially during individual work time. I want to say, shut up and let them work. Don't you notice they're quiet? Yes, Mom, I can send some extra work home, but that's not necessarily going to help. You've got 3 kids younger than him. Worksheets aren't babysitters, Mom. I know you say he reads books at home and reads the dictionary daily, but
Oh,
he does not do that here at school. Stop lying. He's 2 grade levels behind and has been in reading intervention for 3 years. Your son needs more time and help, so that's why I'm bringing up the subject of retention again. Sign this paper right now, Mother, so we can get your baby some help. You
please.
should have done this. You should have done this when the 3 previous teachers asked you, but you kept saying you'd work with him at home. You can't do that because you're not a teacher.
Oh, there you have it.
Yes.
Whew.
Phew, yes. Trying to explain to parents how to help their children is, I know, one of the biggest concerns that teachers have.
Mhm.
And during COVID, it's even it's even more difficult.
Yeah.
It's even more of a challenge
Right.
when because parent conferences are now done online,
Mhm.
and I mean online through Zoom. And if a parent doesn't even log on for the parent conference, that's harder because
Yeah.
it's at an elementary school. In my case, I've had parent conferences at the gate when parents wouldn't come for parent conference.
Mhm.
I would sort of hold that child hostage after school with me until the parent would come. Or I'd just stand at the gate with that parent, with the child until the mother came, or the older brother, or the uncle, or whoever.
Right.
And, but you can't do that with Zoom.
Oh boy.
Yes. Yes.
Phew. Okay, we're going to move now into the future a little bit,
Okay. All
the
right.
future of teaching. So let's talk a little bit about the connections that you've made with other teachers through writing. What has it meant for you to have this third space, maybe between school, home, and just your writing time with other teachers? Let's talk a little bit about that. And if you have a poem that kind of ties in with that special space you have with another community of teacher writers.
Um, the I'm in a book club,
Mhm,
and sometimes we will do a little bit of writing.
mhm,
But my primary mode of writing or area of writing is, primarily for work,
mhm,
but joining the 5-day teacher workshop, 5-day teacher open write,
mhm,
sorry,
mhm.
um, has just brought so much into my life because I'm a writer. I want to write a book one day,
Yeah.
not sure. I mean, and that's something I've been wanting to do for 30 years.
Mhm.
And I have like 4 book ideas and just haven't taken the time to get it in print. But um, having a space to write in and having the time and reading the mentor text and the different topics. And I thought I knew everything that there was to know about English and the types of writing. Oh my gosh. Joining the 5-day open write it just made me realize and learn, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it gave name and framing to some of the writing that I've done, but I just didn't know what it was called.
Mhm.
I thought writing was informative. Oh goodness.
Persuasive.
Thank you. Informative, persuasive, narrative, opinion. I
Yeah,
thought that's all there was.
yeah.
And I know things fall under that, but yeah, so it's been great to learn
Mhm,
about the different types of writing and how you can focus on just specific things. So
mhm.
that has been a wealth of information for me. I do have a poem to
Great.
share, and it's mainly just talking about my process for
Okay.
writing. When this is what I do,
Mhm,
I wrote a short poem called Process.
mhm.
I read the topic and the mentor text. I marvel at the samples and wonder if I'm a fraud.
Mm.
Then realize I'm not. I think of previous writings. I remember students, daughters, friends, family, situations. I ponder how revealing to be. Hurts, successes, events, strengthenings all come into my brain as I consider how much to confess. All of this is done with a huge mug of Kona Joe coffee and the quiet of a morning.
Oh,
Can't write without coffee.
that's
Can't.
beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. You cannot write unless you have a cup of coffee, either half consumed or about to be,
Mhm.
or second or third cup.
Okay. Okay. I think you have a poem in there for the next month. Get that one ready.
Yes, yes, definitely,
You've had
definitely.
you've had time for coffee and quiet time to write. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yes. And it's also nice to be able to um, read the mentor text, read the topic, and
Mhm,
just think about it for a couple of hours. And sometimes I'll do that now that I'm doing distance learning,
mhm, mhm,
where I'll read the topic, mentor text, and some samples at 8 a.m.
mhm,
And then during my break, I'll jot down a couple of ideas, and
mhm.
it just gives me time. And
Yeah.
then I try to have my poem written during my lunch break. By noon, 12:30, I try to have it written.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I like it. I enjoy it.
Okay, so we're going to let's just talk a little bit before we move into the closing. Let's talk about what you think some of the most important issues facing teachers today. What do you think some of those most important
Ooh.
issues?
Well, Common Core instruction is
Mhm.
definitely something that teachers are being asked to utilize, and even though we've been at it for some time, um, I think it's important that teachers know what it means and how to implement lessons that use Common Core instruction, and sort of when to use it and when to put it away and
Mm,
when just to teach and just I think teaching emotionally is important. I
mhm,
think we need to sometimes close our books and just talk. We need to definitely make sure students understand. I mean, one of the big things that I do is I want my students to understand that they are Black and brown students,
right,
because that's who my students are,
right.
and that they're going to grow up and become Black and brown young men and women.
Mhm,
So, and that's not covered in a textbook. That's
mhm,
not always in a lesson.
mhm,
But I need for the young men that I work with to know, the young men that I teach to know that police brutality exists.
yes,
I want them to know the police can be phenomenal
mhm,
and the police can be terrible.
yeah,
And I explain that to them as gently as I can without fear.
right.
I talk to them about it. So I think it's important that all educators talk to students about, um, George Floyd
Mhm,
and Trayvon Martin
mhm,
and Tamir Rice and some of the different things that have happened. I
mhm.
also think they need to be aware of profiling
Yeah.
and what that looks like. And so I gently, in fifth grade, I introduced them to it in a very gentle, slow way. I don't want to scare them, but I want them to understand that all they're going to do is get older, and there's going to be a day when they're somewhere and someone says something. And I talk to them about college. I explain to them that I want them to go. And I say, there are also vocational schools, even though there aren't. So I do feel like one of the big things that we need to bring back that we had in the
Yeah.
70s and 80s, I mean, and also 60s and probably 50s, I don't know, is vocational schools.
Yeah.
Because, and that's the thing, as teachers, we can see their future sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You can, when you have a special needs student, when you have a student who is struggling to read and decode and remember syllables and remember multiplication facts, when you see that with a child who's 10 and 11,
Right.
you can slightly predict that they're going to struggle in middle school and high school unless there's a major intervention.
Right.
But that child is going to be an adult, and I want that child to understand that there are other schools and programs out there,
Mm-hmm.
and there are junior colleges out there.
Yeah.
And so, as a teacher, I think it's important that we introduce students to different types of colleges.
Mm-hmm.
Again, junior colleges, we introduce them to HBCUs. We
Right.
introduce them to, we encourage them to um, take up a trade. We encourage them to, be safe. And, my biggest thing is I tell them, I don't want them going to jail. And I explained that to them. I gently talk to them about the school to prison pipeline, but, gently.
Right.
But I also talk to them about affluence and how some people are get away with things and some people are not able to,
Mm-hmm.
and that situations happen. So I call it my social justice teaching.
Yeah.
And that is not in the curriculum.
Yeah.
And that is not tested, but it is crucial for, I feel it's crucial for me to introduce these concepts to them so that when they go to middle school and one or two teachers talk to them about it, they have sort of a baseline or
Right.
something to, a bottom foundation sort of,
Mm-hmm.
because, their parents may not talk to them about these things, or their parents may have specific feelings about it, but a lot of them will feel like, oh, they're too young,
Right.
and I don't want them worried. And I understand that. That's why I'm very gentle
Yeah.
when I talk to them, but they have to know. I mean, in addition to, you know, teaching them how to cite evidence,
Mm-hmm.
teaching them, two-digit division, division with two-digit divisors,
Mm-hmm.
and, teaching them the different writing genres and
Right.
what a persuasive looks like versus what a narrative looks like. I
Yeah.
mean, those things are important to science and social studies, introducing them to the concept of Native Americans and what they went through,
Mm-hmm.
and, learning and knowing about the environment of the United States as a fifth grade teacher.
Right.
And, and slowly introducing them to the Constitution and what it means and what it meant for all people, not just the men who wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like fifth grade is so important. And I mean, all grades are, but I really
Right.
feel like fifth grade's important, especially because they're it's the last little door of being a child to me,
Yeah.
because middle school for me is the first door of adulthood, even though they're 11 and 12, but
Right. Yeah.
that's how I feel about it.
Wow. Well, we have been talking for about an hour.
I
So
know. I
I want
know.
to respect your time, but in closing, if you have a poem that you feel speaks to whatever is the best way to sum up how you're feeling at this point, or just a good place to end, and it's special for you, I'd love for you to share.
I I have one that is special to me. It has nothing to do with teaching,
Okay.
but it is fun. And sometimes, there are days in school when you're a teacher where you do a little bit of teaching and you say, you know what, we've been working hard. Today's going to be about fun
Okay.
and enjoyment. So this poem for me is about fun and enjoyment. It is called My Rectangular Honey. All right. I desired you before I even met you. You kept popping up on commercials and billboards, begging me to pick you and embrace you. You appealed to my sense of wanting to have the latest gadget, wanting to be fly, wanting to be a rock star. I forced myself, though, to wait a year due to all the recalls and upgrades. Once I had you, I slept with you, took you into the bathroom and downloaded a multitude of unnecessary apps just so I could see those colorful little squares.
Oh,
Now that you're mine and we've been hitched for 10 plus years, I still desire you. You kept me connected to faraway descendants. You hold images of angels, my past and present, and new learnings. Also, though, you have brought me dreadful words and have given me depressive news that took me to the floor.
mhm.
At times, I'm addicted to you, like a 16-year-old girl having the hots for a 20-year-old boy, 20-year-old boy, which is alarming, considering I lived without you for the first 30 years of my life.
That is priceless.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't remember what the theme was. I mean, I don't remember exactly what the theme was for that one,
Mhm,
but I wanted people, I wanted readers to not know what I was talking about at the beginning.
mhm,
Almost like a drug.
mhm.
Um, and it's true. It's true. I wanted an iPhone as soon as I saw it because it looked so cool.
Yeah.
But I waited and waited and waited, and they kept having upgrades and recalls. And a young man at church bought one, and he kept having to turn it in and get another one. And I said, nope, I'm going to wait until all the glitches are finished. But
Here we are.
here we are. Yes. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you, Sienna. That was amazing. You're
Thank
you're
you.
you're
Thank
just
you.
a breath of fresh air, and I'm so grateful that you were willing to participate and share your beautiful writing with us.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your writing inspirations. Your writing is, I mean, you know, your writing is phenomenal and it inspires me and it helps me to take chances because I feel like, okay, I know Stacey somewhat and she's put herself out there. She writes about things. She pulls back the curtain and then she really pulls it back and reveals things. And I think I can do that. I can do this, especially since it's something I love to do. So
Yay.
thank you.
You're welcome. So we will stop the recording here.
Okay.